right, everyone, we are live right now on YouTube and Zoom, and live here in class for the ones that are attending here. I know some of you have been asking me questions. Make sure your cameras are on, please. I know some of you asked me questions about the check-in, right? So the app that we're using to register attendance. Unfortunately, we're having a little issue with the app. I already contacted support. So what we're doing is the old-fashioned way. I'm reviewing your whole attendance. So I have, between me and somebody else, at the end of the class, we export your attendance from Zoom, and then we have to check every single video of you to make sure that you were here. Okay? All right, you guys can hear me? Because Ruth says she cannot hear me. You guys can hear me, right? All right, so... join with audio. Take. All right, hey Sanam on YouTube, how are you? And anybody else that might be watching on YouTube, you're always welcome to chime in on the live chat and ask questions as well. All right. So, guys, from now on, it's going to be an average of two chapters a day. There's going to be certain chapters, like tomorrow's chapter is just one, because these are long chapters, or it takes there's a lot of information that I need to address within the chapter. So it might not be a long chapter sometimes, but is something that you guys need to focus for the state exam. So I'll stay there a little bit longer. All right. We usually start at 5:40 on the dot, and we try to finish before 9:30 if it's the evening class. Morning classes are 10 to 2, right? So always the 10 minutes to start, and hopefully get you guys out of here early so you don't have to listen to me anymore, okay? All right, so yesterday we did not finish chapter 3. Hold on, did I ignore somebody? Nadia, did I ignore you? Miss New York, did I ignore you? I'm sorry. If it's regarding the student ID for the check-in on the app, or are you just waving? That's what it is. Sorry. I got, just so you know, I got 41, 42 people right now on the screen, and you're like a little tiny, right? Right, Anna? Looks like a little tiny faces. So I'm not ignoring you, okay? All right, let's, there. Make sure your cameras are facing you, please, that you're on. The check-in is not working, Ingrid. It's not working right now, so I'm doing manually, so don't worry about that. For those of you that during the class are watching TV, make sure you turn off the TV, Joe. For those of you that have people around, make sure you kick them out, you know, so you can pay attention to this, Chaz. I'm not going to be calling out your names all the time, so don't worry about it. I will briefly mention certain people along the way. Chaz, kick everybody out, please. Make sure, because you need to focus. It's only 4. All right, Ruth got it. Perfect. It's only 4 hours. Oh, you're in the same room as Anthony? Then kick Anthony into another room. All right. What you need to understand is it's only 4 weeks, and it's only a couple hours a day, right? And then after those 4 weeks, that's it. You pass the school exam, you pass the state exam, and you become licensed. So what I usually say is if you want success, you need to sacrifice a little bit. In this case, it's literally 4 weeks of your time. Holidays are over. I know Valentine's is coming. But what better gift for Valentine than to be licensed, right? That should be your new ring right there, your license. All right? Zakia, I got you. Don't worry. Let's see. Tatiana says, starving, I'll be biting through class. Thanks. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I'm starving too, by the way, just so you know. I started a New Year's resolution, so went on a diet, kinda. So I'm starving too. All right. Anyway. Ingrid, do we have classes on Martin Luther King Day? So here's the thing. I had a dream and I thought about this very hard. Yes, for us to accomplish the dream, we cannot stop. Only because the bad weather is coming up and we don't know if we're going to stop because of snow. And if we stop for every holiday, it's going to be a problem, okay? That's one of the reasons why I canceled December classes, because there are so many holidays happening right in the middle of the week that it didn't make sense to do the classes during the December, all right? So I am sorry, Ingrid, we do have class on Martin Luther King. In fact, I'm starting the morning class right on Martin Luther King Day, all right? So this is to accomplish the dream that we all have, simple. All right, so catching up from yesterday, we were talking about encumbrances. We talked about estates, which is ownership with possession or rights with possession. And we stopped at life estates. So when we stopped at life estates, we were talking about the fact that life estates means somebody is the contingency or the condition, right, for the ownership. So I mentioned, for instance, Stacy. I'll sell to Stacy for as long as she's alive, right? And also Denise. That was one of the two people I used as far as they're alive, right? That means that once one of you dies, the property comes back to me, right? We even talked about the life estate. You can sell the life estate, right? You can sell the life estate to somebody else. And when that, I think we sold it to Calvin, right? Stacy sold to Calvin. And at that point, Calvin now owns a life estate because it's still based on Stacy's life, right? So the deed restriction or the condition does not change just because we sold. And this is true for any deed restriction, as we'll talk about in a different chapter. Okay, so under life estates, there's two types of life estates. We have the conventional, which is the ones we talked about, the ordinary, where, hey, I sold it to you based on your life. And there's the pour autre vie, which is, it's French for another's life, right? So I could sell it to you, right? Edith, for instance, I can sell it to you, Edith, based on Chrissy's life, all right? So that means that you own it as long as she's alive. Now, she's young. Hopefully, she'll live a very long time. But we never know, right? Knock on wood. But we never know how long she's gonna last on this earth, right? So it's based on somebody's life. It could be yours, the ordinary, or it could be based on somebody else's. And then we have legal life estates. Now, when we're talking about legal life estates, we're talking about marriage. We're talking about a husband and wife, or spouse and spouse, as it is recognized now in most states. Okay? So spouse and spouse, husband and wife, if you want to put it there. So there's a marriage. Yeah, no, you can see it also here. Yeah, just in case you need. All right. So that's marriage. Now, these are commonly known as homestead, dour and courtesy, or elective share. Not elective chair, okay? This is not the electric chair, okay? We're not going to kill anybody, okay? This is elective share, elected, right? So we chose. Now, depending on the state that you're in, they will call it a homestead because it's where you live. Depending on the state you're in, they still allow what's called dour and courtesy. And dour and courtesy, as I'll talk about it later. Dour courtesy is when husband dies, the wife acquires the 50% that was owned by the husband, and vice versa. Courtesy is when the wife dies, the husband gets the 50%. All right. So in this case, is in a marriage, most states do not recognize common law marriages, so it has to be an actual marriage. So for the legal life estate to happen, it has to be spouse and spouse. Okay. Gloria, don't worry about the check-in. I'll do that manually. The system has an error. Narges, when are you going to receive your books? So a few books came in, not enough. We're still waiting for more books to come in. I will ship them out based on the order that was ordered. So whoever ordered first will get them first, the ones that we already received. The others, we're still waiting, and I apologize for that. That's the printing that's in back order. It's not us. But they will be sent out, okay? So if you order the book on the first day of this promotion, then most likely you will receive it. You will receive it over the next week or so, okay? Now, we talked about conventional life estate. Well, conventional is created by grant, okay? So conventional is created by grant. What is a grant? That means you are allowing somebody to get the property from you. You're granting the property. So usually a deed is between the seller and the buyer, right? That's what it is. A deed is between the seller and the buyer. So the seller grants the rights that he has or she has, grants those rights to the buyer. Okay, so conventional life estate is when I sell to you and say, hey, it's the property's yours as long as you're alive. I determine that. That's the conventional life estate. Okay, and I think you guys remember these terms, right? You remember from yesterday was the last things we talked about: remainderment and reversionary interest, or reverting. Can anybody tell me what remainderment means? Anybody? YouTube, Zoomers, let me know what remainderment means. You remember? Let me know. No? Got the book. Was it mailed to you? So you're one of the first ones. Lucky. You're trying to figure. You're going back, guys. Never go back. Okay. When I ask you questions, no, I'll tell you why. I don't want you to be looking for it, because then you're going to waste time. It's either you know it or you don't know it, and it's okay, because we are in the beginning. I will repeat this a million times. Don't go back in pages. Don't go back to your notes. I'm trying to make sure that you remember stuff, and if you don't, it's okay, because I will explain it again. All right. So here's some of the answers we got. Let's see. Wow, a lot of answers we got. That's cool. From Carly. iCarly says third party. Mr. Piga says third party. Chrissy, third party, and so on. Very good. So third party that receives title. Perfect. A lot of you participated. That's awesome. So a remainderman, or there's no remainder woman. Okay, it's remainderman is the term. Okay. By the way, watch Wonder Woman, the 1984. Apparently, it's a really good movie. After you pass the state exam. So remainderman is whoever remains from the contract. So there's a first party, right? The first parties, which is the seller and the buyer, right? And the remainder is a third party to the contract. So I can sell to you, right, with a condition that Ruth uses as for hospital purposes, if you guys remember. And by the way, you guys are going to notice that I'm going to try to use as much as possible the same people for the examples, so you guys always associate what I talked about in the first class, second class, in the 10th class, right? I'm always going to try to go back and forth and continue the storyline, okay? The reason why I do storyline, almost like a movie, is because we grasp the information a lot easier that way, all right? So yesterday I sold to Ruth as long as she used it as hospital purposes, right? But what did Ruth do? She decided to convert it to an office building, right? You guys remember this, right? So when she converted to office building, what happened was she lost her rights, because the condition of my sale to Ruth was keep it as hospital purposes. If she fails, it reverts to me, right? That's called reversionary interest, as you guys have right here. Reverts to me, reversionary interest. But if I chose to give that property to Sandra, I think Sandra is the one I used yesterday, right? If I chose to give that property to Sandra as a remainder, right? Then instead of coming back to me, it will go to Sandra, which is unrelated to the transaction, right? Sandra's not the seller. Sandra's not the buyer. She's not involved at all in the transaction other than hoping that Ruth does something to the property, because then Sandra will receive the property by default. You guys understand? It doesn't come to me, doesn't go to my heirs, it goes to this third party called remainder. Okay? I know it's weird for you because I'm pointing here, but it's actually in the screen, they'll know. All right, cool. Guys, I'm adapting to the live and to the online. So the people here see it different than what you see. They just see this portion right here, this block. And me, but somewhere else. Anyway. So you guys already understood this. You cannot damage. You guys know all about this. But now let's go to conventional life estates. So we have ordinary life estate and we have pour autre vie. That means for another's life, as I said before. Pour autre vie. That's another's life. And with reversion or with remainder. What's the difference? With reversion comes back to the grantor. With remainder, as I was just explaining, it reverts to another person, okay? So the key is with remainder, reverts to another. With reversion, reverts to the grantor, which is the seller, okay? All right, you can do this right here. There you go. It reverts to the seller. All right, so this is this table, just a quick summary of what we just talked about. All right, let's see. Guys, make sure your cameras are on and facing you. Whoever has a camera off, try to turn the camera on, please. Calvin, I see you're there twice. Got you. Lula's off. It's okay. Brian, because they're doing the classes all over. They just want to. Fine. And who else? And Brendan, Leon. All right. Make sure your names are correct. I just want you guys to verify this as well. Make sure your names are correct. Show your first and last name as it is on your registration, please. All right? Except for Carly. Hi, Carly. I got you. All right. Chrissy, can you zoom out real quick? Yes. Okay, zoomed out real quick. Do you want me to zoom back in or it's fine? There you go. All right, so the next thing we have, you guys are ready? Next thing we have, hold on. Ingrid is asking which page? Because I cannot tell you what I'm on. I'm always on something, right? Motivation, right? Which page? We're on page 34. Page 34. Give you a second. All right, good? Great. So now we're going to move to page 35. Under page 35, I want to talk about the legal life estate. This is the one I told you is based on marriage. All right, you guys remember a couple of minutes ago I said there's the ordinary life estate, which is granting, right, when there's a seller and a buyer. And then there's the legal life estate, which is legal rights that a spouse has upon the other spouse's death. Okay? So legal life estate is created by state law as opposed to being created by the property owner's agreement. So that's your legal rights based on state law, and every state has different laws. So, as it says, provisions vary from state to state. The focus of a legal life estate is defining and protecting the property rights of surviving family members upon the death of the husband or wife. The major forms of legal life estate are homestead, dour and courtesy, and elective share. For homestead, if you see the word homestead, we're talking about your principal residence. Usually I say this is your main marital, because you could have a vacation home, right? Main marital residence. Okay? And we say main marital residence because this is where we live. Spouse and spouse, this is where we live. This is where we sleep. This is where all our activities, kids and everything else happen, right? It's not a vacation home. It's not an investment property. It's where we live. So depending on the state that you're in, right, you only have rights to the main marital residence, even if it's owned by one person only. Okay? So let's say I'm the owner of the property, not my wife. Well, when we die, when she dies or when I die, whatever, the rights are distributed based on state law. In this case, the main marital residence belongs to both, even if it's under my name. So these are things we're going to go over right now. And you need to understand the difference between each state. So when we get to the state portion, it will be a little bit better defined, but we need to understand the difference from state to state. What enables us to have certain rights or not. Okay, so one of them is homestead. Most states have a law that allows the marital residence to fall by default, fall to the surviving spouse. Okay, by default. Ingrid, does it apply if you have a prenup? So the thing about prenups, it's a contract that says, a legal contract that says how we will separate or join certain assets or all the assets, okay? So a prenup, it's like you getting a divorce before the marriage. So a prenup is literally, hey, if we ever get divorced, this is what we're going to do. It has nothing to do with death. Okay, so death is by will or by state law, and then it goes back to this. All right, so prenup is how we separate our assets once we get divorced. So it's literally saying, I love you, I want to marry you, but in case tomorrow that love is gone, here's how we're going to split things. So we're presetting the divorce. That's what it is. Okay? In a nicer way. Obviously, this should be said in a nicer way. If there's any nicer way to say it. Now, the Homestead Laws protect family members against losing their homes to creditors attempting to collect the debts. And Homestead Laws generally provide that all or portions of one's homestead are exempt from a forced sale executed for the collection of general debts. So if you have a mortgage on the property, as an example, if you have a mortgage on the property and one of you dies, can the bank come and say, hey, the mortgage was on this person, not on you. So if you're dead, if this person is dead, then you have to sell the property, or we're going to foreclosure or anything like that? The answer is no. They allow the estate to continue making payments. So who's the estate? Well, the estate is the deceased person. But there's somebody called estate administrator, which usually in this scenario would be the spouse, the surviving spouse. So as long as the surviving spouse is still alive, they can keep making payments on behalf of the estate of the person that died. Does that make sense? So they are protected. That's what we're saying here. As far as tax debts, seller financing debt, debts for home improvements, and mortgage debts, they might not be, again, this varies from state laws, right? So they might not be exempt. One thing that's important is that the family must occupy the property. The family must occupy the property. That's why I said it's our main marital residence. It's not the vacation home. It's not the investment property. This only applies to our main marital residence, where we live. Okay? Homestead interest cannot be conveyed by one spouse. Both spouses must sign the deed conveying homestead property. So even though I might be the only owner of the property, if it's our main marital residence, I cannot sell it without my wife's approval. You guys got it? This is not true, and we'll talk about it later again. This is not true for a property that I own by myself and we do not live in. Okay, so pay attention because I'm going to repeat this a million times, right? If it's a house that I do not live in, it's an investment property, and I'm the only owner of the property, right? And again, depending from state to state. State of New Jersey, for instance, if it's a house that I own by myself, I do not live there, it's not our marital residence, I do not need my wife's signature in order to sell that property. If it's a property that we both own, then of course I need both signatures. If it's our marital residence, then we need both signatures even if it's under my name only. All right? So these are things you have to clearly understand. Okay? The homestead exemption and restrictions endure over the life of the head of the household and then pass on to the children under legal age. So if they're minors, they cannot come and collect the property from the minors either. All right, so they're protected. And of course, again, state laws define specifically how the interest transfers upon the death of the head of the household. Okay? The homestead interest, obviously, just like everything else, if the property is sold, then the homestead interests are extinguished. Right? When I sell the property, can the spouse come and claim something? No, because it belongs to somebody else. It's sold. My wife can sue me, that's called a divorce, and try to claim certain rights into the property, but that's about it. Once it's sold, it's sold. She cannot recuperate the property anymore because I sold the property. Okay? And then here we go. In some states, everything varies from state to state. So in some states, homestead exemptions are automatic. In others, you need to file for the exemption. Now, let's focus on dour and courtesy. We're on the next page. Dour and courtesy. When we talk about dour and courtesy, this is the right that the spouse has, the surviving spouse has on the estate or assets that are owned by the deceased spouse. All right? So dour is the right that the wife has. Courtesy is the right that the husband has. Nowadays, we call it spouse and spouse, but originally it was defined this way. Dour was the right that the wife had if the husband died, while courtesy was the right the husband had if the wife died. All right? So what does this mean? Under the dour and courtesy, we owned the property as a whole. Okay? So husband and wife as a whole, they owned the property. It was not separated. Oh, you own half and I own half. No, as a whole. So therefore, if we consider there's two people, it would be 50-50, right? Even though there's no direct separation. But when one party dies, the other party automatically receives the other party's side. So now the wife gets 100%, and their right is called dour. Okay? They get 100% by the right called dour. They acquire the half. So it doesn't go to the heirs, it goes to the surviving spouse automatically, right? If it was the other way around, right, where the wife died, then the husband would be 100%, and this is called courtesy. All right, so dour and courtesy is simply whatever happens, whether I die or my wife dies, whatever we own it as a whole. All properties, not just a home, all properties, right? And that means that once she dies, I acquire automatically. If I die first, then she acquires automatically. Not every state acknowledges dour and courtesy anymore. For instance, here in New Jersey, it was abolished back in the 80s. We don't do it anymore. Now it's just the main marital residence that it automatically belongs to both. Okay? Hold on a second. Okay. Janice, I just answered. But I like the way you put it. What is it called in an alternative lifestyle? Is it still dour and courtesy? Yeah. That was funny. Ingrid, can you have a will to specify otherwise? So one of the things I want you guys to understand, as I was saying before, is that these laws that we're talking about are things that happen automatic. Okay? So just like you can have a prenup to determine the divorce, you can have a will that says it'll be handled otherwise, right? But these are automatic. So unless husband and wife agreed, right? Unless husband and wife agree that, hey, if I die, then my kids get my 50%. Unless we agree, we have some type of agreement already on paper, then this will happen automatically, right? Has nothing to do with the will, right? Just like, so the will is for when I die, my assets go to whoever I determine to go to, right? But this are things that happen automatically. Who has the immediate right? And this varies, pay attention, again, varies from state to state. Varies from state to state. If you don't have a will, state law takes over. If you have a will, you might be able to, certain things, not all of them, might be able to pass along to your heirs, bypassing whatever the state law says. This is why preparing a will is so important, but preparing a will and consulting with an attorney or an estate attorney is way more important when it comes to having properties. All right, so you know what can you protect or not with a will. All right. So to transfer property within dour and courtesy states, again, as it says, within dour and courtesy states, so not all states, the husband or wife must obtain the release of dower interest from the other spouse in order to convey clear title to another party. So just as I was saying, if I want to sell a property that's owned by me, but in a state that they acknowledge dour and courtesy, that means what's mine is yours, what's yours is mine. That's what dour and courtesy means, right? Even if it's owned by me alone, it's still yours. So I need your permission to be able to sell it. And that's what we're saying here. I need my spouse to sign a document saying that they'll release the rights, as I was saying before, right, Ingrid? They will release the rights of dour and courtesy. Okay? That it's okay for me to sell without them. That it's okay for me not to give them anything. That it's okay, right? Good luck with that. That it's okay for this transfer to happen. Okay? So if both parties sign, the dower right is automatically extinguished. All right? All right. Okay, as it says here, Dour and Courtesy laws have been largely supplanted by community property laws and elective share. So what is elective share? So it's a right that's given only to the surviving spouse. Okay? Only to surviving spouse. The elective share is a state-level statute enabling a surviving spouse to make a minimum claim. All right? So when we're talking about elective share, it's very simply saying, if in my will I put 0 assets to my spouse, right? It's called a right of election or elective share, whatever way you want to call it. If I put $0 to my wife, let's say, I left everything to my kids but nothing to my wife. When I die, my wife's not going to be very happy, right? Because she gets absolutely nothing, correct? Well, not in the state of New Jersey, because in the state of New Jersey, we have elective share. We have the right of election only to a surviving spouse. Okay? Only to surviving spouse. Surviving spouse. Okay? That means they have a minimum claim. And we'll talk about it better when we get to the state of New Jersey portion, or whatever state that you'll be studying. But the elective share says, even though I put 0 in the will, where my wife gets nothing, right? And she'll curse me out until the afterlife, until she joins me later to beat me up in the afterlife, right? What she can do is go to court and say, hey, court, Your Honor, I'm the surviving spouse. So I'm entitled to a minimum share. So even though that, and whatever she wants to call me at the time, gave me $0, I'm entitled to something by state law. So in the state of New Jersey, as an example, it's 1/3. So whatever I own, right? You don't have to write it now because we have the state-specific portion. I'm just making sure you guys understand. This is only for the surviving spouse. She's entitled to storm into court and say, no, no, no. The kids don't get the whole thing. I'm entitled to 1/3, right? For putting up with him all these years, I'm entitled to 1/3. That's what it is. Simple. It's only to the surviving spouse. Remember this. Okay? All right. Next thing we have, and we're almost done with the chapter, so we can move on, is a leasehold estate. Do you guys remember what this means? Anybody? Leasehold. We had freehold and we have leasehold. Freehold is ownership. Leasehold involves no, it's okay. It's the second day. It's okay. So, very good. It involves rentals. For those of you that are answering tenants, it involves a tenant, but it's a rental tenant. Because as I mentioned before, there's 2 types of tenants. There's the freehold tenant, right? And there's the leasehold tenant. All this means is occupant, right? Or possession of the property. All right, so I want to be clear that when we're talking about leasing, the type of tenant that we have, it's a renter, right? So this is the type of tenant that we have, renter, okay? So every time you see leasehold, we're talking about tenants, so people that can occupy or take possession of the property for the purpose of renting. So it says lease, and for quick association, you're renting the space, all right? You take possession, you have certain rights to the property, okay? If it happens to be a freehold estate, then you're a freehold tenant, you're the owner of the property. You are the landlord, the owner of the property. If it's a leasehold estate, then you are a renter tenant. Okay, see the difference? Right? Freehold is owner, yes. So you have the full rights. You have the full bundle of rights. Speaking of which, guys, can you write down right now in the Zoom chat, if you remember, let me know. What are the 5 fundamental rights that we have when we buy property? What is the bundle of rights that we have when we buy property? Because that's what a freehold tenant will have versus a leasehold tenant. Anybody? I just lose. All right, I see your answers coming through. I just want to make sure I did not lose YouTube. If anybody's watching on YouTube, let me know if you're still listening to me. If not, then I'll know it dropped. All right, perfect. So we got great answers here. Hey, Katya, make sure your name is correct. There's a bunch of things to your name there. All right, so we have the right of possession. We have the right to use the property. We have the right to exclude people, right, from the property. We have the right to encumber the property. That means put a mortgage on it, for instance, right? And we have the right to sell the property because it's our properties. We can sell it, right? So these are the rights that we have. Katya, you're talking about fixtures. I'm talking about the rights that we have in a property, okay? And this is different for these two. Because a freehold tenant has all the rights, okay? Where a leasehold tenant, leasehold, has some of the rights. A leasehold tenant cannot sell the property or encumber the property, right? They can only take possession because they're tenants, like I am a tenant right here. I can take possession and use it, okay? I can exclude certain people, right? Except the landlord, if the landlord really needs to come into the property, right? I cannot just say, hey, no, you're not coming in, right? As long as they give me notice, I have to allow them in, right? And I have the right to use the property for any legal manner. But I cannot transfer the property or sell the property or gift the property to anybody else because I'm a tenant, leasehold renter, right? Leasehold renter, tenant, right? So these are the bundle of rights that we have. As a leasehold tenant, we don't have all the rights, only some of the rights. Okay? And now let's talk about the different types of leases. So estate, you guys already know, means possession of the property. So I own certain rights and have possession of the property, right? Estate means asset, possession, certain rights that I acquired, right? So here we have the first one is the most complicated one, and we're going to go over all of this in a second. But estate for years is the most complicated one to grasp, right? So now my question is for everybody, what do you guys think when we're talking about leases? If it's a lease and you see this term right here, estate for year or a lease for years, what do you guys think this type of lease is? Is it a long-term lease? Is it a short-term lease? Is it a commercial? Is it residential? What is your first thought? First thought when you see estate for years? You think commercial? Okay. All right, let's see what we got. So Ingrid said for a limited amount of time. I can see that for where it says for years, right? Limited amount of time. Chrissy says long term. Carly says long term. Chaz says rent to own with a question mark. Not sure. Okay. Carly says commercial. Anna said commercial as well. Antara, you said short term lease. Where does 4 years sound like short term? All right, I told you the first thing that comes to mind. Ruth, month to month. Because it's 4 years, it's month to month. Okay. Sandra says long term. Sanam says long term. Gloria, long term. All right. Tatiana says short term. Must be the snacks. I'm not sure. All right. Anthony says commercial. Let's see. And could be any period of time, just definite days. Definitely, that's what I see for years. Antar says fixed. Standard commercial. Wow, a lot of answers. A lot of answers. Okay, period of time and so on. All right. So the term for years is the most confusing one because unfortunately, this type of lease does not even have to be for a year. This type of lease could be for 1 day. It could be for 1 week. It could be for 10 years. the thing about this lease, so you guys know, the thing about this type of lease, the years, okay, is that it's a definite period. Period. Therefore, it has what's called a check in, check out. Okay? So this is not your month to month. Okay? This is not your month to month. This is not the week to week. This is the, hey, you get in today and you leave tomorrow. You get in today and you leave a month from now on this date. You get in today and you leave a year from now on this date. It's the fact that we defined an entry and an exit to the lease. You guys got it? It's the most confusing one because it's so broad. It's like a state for years. So it feels like it's going to last a long time, right? But no, a state for years is the only one that's for a definite period, start and end date. So Carly just wrote Airbnb as in the question mark. Well, just like Ruth mentioned right now, it could be a hotel, motel, Airbnb, right? I know you guys thought I was going to say Holiday Inn. Airbnb, right? Isn't that how the song goes? Hotel, no? Okay, too early. All right, so Airbnb, but it could also be your rental lease at home. If you rent right now and you rent it with a 1-year contract, that's a estate for years. You rented with a 6-month contract, well, that's an estate for years, right? So any type of lease or occupancy that has a definite period of time is called estate for years. Again, it's the most confusing one, but that's what estate for years means. It could be for 1 day, it could be for 1 week, it could be for 2 months, it could be for 10 years. The key feature of estate for years is the check-in, check-out option. The, hey, you just got in today and you have to leave tomorrow, much like a hotel, right? Usually that's what I use as an example is resorts, Airbnbs. You know you move in on a particular date at a particular time and you have to leave at a particular date and time, right? Because if you don't, right, and we're going to go to, we're going to skip period to period for a second. Because if you don't leave, then it converts to one of two things. It converts to either I allow you to stay there a little bit longer. That means it's at my will that I allow you to stay there. Or, hey, I told you had to leave. I already rented to somebody else, right? Somebody else is moving in. So I'm suffering because you're still there, all right? So at sufferance means you are there without my permission. You had a clock and the clock ended. The time ended. So you have to leave. Much like when you're in a hotel and you have to check out by 11 or 12 or whatever it is, right? And you call in and you say, hey, is it possible to stay a little bit longer? If they allow you to stay longer until 3 or maybe give you another day, right? If they allow you that, then it's at will. If they say, no, you got to go and you're still there, then it's at sufferance. All right? So in any instance that you said you're going to leave, you have to leave. Whether it was preset a year ago, estate for years, right? Whether it was preset a year ago in your 1-year lease, or you have this one, which is your month to month or your week to week. That means your term or rental term renews automatically. This one ends based on the date that we preset. This one has no ending. It renews automatically. So it keeps on going. So every month, as long as you pay, you gain another month and another month and another month and so on. So every month as long as you pay. Yeah, Ruth, it's renewable. Automatically renews. Yep, there you go. So in any event, this one, if it's a month to month, and you say, Carly's like, so isn't that rent? Yeah, both of these are rent. The difference is, did we define that it was going to be a 1-year rent? Or did we say, hey, it's a month to month, this month you're here, tomorrow we don't know, right? If it's a month to month, that means that every month you have an opportunity to say, hey, next month I'm leaving. If it's in the state for years, like a 1-year lease, for instance, you have to honor the whole period of time that you're there. Or the landlord can sue you for leaving too early. You guys got it? So that's pretty much the difference between these two. One, it says you're going to leave on this date. The other one says, hey, I'll keep staying as long as you allow me to stay here, or until I give you notice that I'm leaving. Okay, so rental. Both of these are rental. All of these, actually, are rental because it's lease. So Miss Loyal over here goes, which one can you sue? Oh, by the way, that's how I call your brother, right? And I'm always like, Mr. Loyal, how are you? So which one can you sue? By the way, your brother's MIA today. He's fired. I don't know. So which one can you sue? That's the question. Well, in all of these, we can sue. All of these. Because in the state for years, let's say you're supposed to stay for a year, right? And you leave 6 months into it. Well, you're still liable for the remainder. You still have to pay me another 6 months. So I can sue you for the additional 6 months. On a month to month, if you said you were going to leave, but you didn't leave yet, I can sue you because you were supposed to leave. Now you're there at sufferance. So I can sue you for compensation because maybe I had to pay the new tenant that was supposed to move in. Does that make sense? So in all of these, we can sue. And one of the things I want you guys to understand, and we'll talk about contracts in a different chapter, but one of the things I want you guys to understand is that suing someone is based on an agreement. So if the agreement is breached, you can always sue. Simple as that. Right? So it's a civil lawsuit based on the agreement or a criminal lawsuit. But no crime was broken here, so it's a civil lawsuit always. Does that make sense, guys? You can always sue. At least I know who's looking for money. Right, Chrissy? She's probably the one that goes to ShopRite, throws a yogurt on the floor so she can slip on it later. True story. Not Chrissy, but true story. This happened when I used to live in Newark. The house behind me, my neighbor, that's how she made like $1.8 million or something, right? She had done it already in her country, and then she decided to do it here in the United States. Chaz is like, noted. Now I know what to do. But this time she actually got injured. She actually broke her leg or something on her leg. So now she has to live off of the lawsuit. And she was caught on another one. The camera was pointed at her doing the whole thing where she dropped the yogurt, went to the next aisle, came back, slipped on the yogurt that she dropped. Anyway, lawsuits. This is the country for lawsuits. All right, Sanam, you wrote, notice is given in 30 days. It depends. I will explain that when we get to leases. Let's see what else we have. Anna, with period to period, do you have to tell the landlord when you're leaving? How much notice do you have to give? So with period to period, the notice usually matches the period of time. So what Sanam wrote on YouTube is that the notice given is 30 days. Depending on the state that you're in, it might be different. So state of New Jersey is 1 month before the lease is due. So if the lease, the payment is due, for instance, on the 5th, then you had to give notice the previous 5th. Right? So it's 1 month. 1 month is not 30 days. Right? So you need to know the state laws when it comes to that as well. Right? So you have to always give notice somehow. All right? Let's go to the next page, and it says estate for years, page 37. And pretty much we're just, I'm just showing you I have it highlighted. in green is what you really need to focus on, because it says right here that estate for years is a leasehold estate for a definite period of time with a beginning date and an ending date. And Lula just wrote, unless it's an estate for years. So you're talking about the notice. Lula, the difference between the notice on the month-to-month and the notice on an estate for years, that I gave you the notice before you moved in. You gave me the notice before you moved in. Just like a Airbnb, you said check in, check out. So we gave the notice up front. So I'm already expecting you to leave at the end of the year, right? Unless we automatically, or unless we come to an agreement to renew somehow. Yep, initial contract. The notice was given up front. That's the difference between a definite period or estate for years and a period to period. Perfect. All right, I think we're getting somewhere, right? Period to period is periodic tenancy, so it renews automatically, as we already said. All right. Tenancy at will, I allow it to stay there, and net sufferance is without consent. All right, so we already covered all this. It's just highlighted for reference purposes. All right, and we are done with this chapter. We do have another chapter that handles leases more in detail, and then we have the state portion that tells you all the tips and tricks about the state law when it comes to leases. All right. So, guys, what I'm going to do now is give you guys a quick break as I switch to, for YouTube, and here I switch to chapter 4. It is now 6:40, so 6:45 we will be back, okay? YouTubers, I'm going to close this session. I'm going to open another one right after. See you guys in a bit.